All right, well, we are a couple minutes after the hour, so why don't we go ahead and kick off our program today? Again, my name's Elizabeth Glidden with MHP, and we have been hosting this program called Federal Focus on Housing for over a year now. And thank you so much to everyone for participating, sending suggestions, engaging with our guest speakers. Um, and this is a particularly busy time in Minnesota because we've also started our state legislative session. So I know there's a lot more divided attention as folks are both watching what's happening federally, but also paying attention to what's happening in Minnesota as the state legislature starts to do its work. Let me just give a quick overview of who we will hear from today before handing things over to our first guest speaker. But we have an important program today where we're going to hear about some very critical campaigns and opportunities to engage in what's happening federally. So first, um, we are very honored to have with us Marie-Claire Tran-Leung, who is the Evictions Initiative Project Director. I hope that I have that correct, at the National Housing Law Project. And she is leading the campaign work and on the mixed status rule, and you're going to learn about that and about the Keep Families Together campaign in just a minute as we turn to her, who will be our major presenter for today. We also will be joined by Ben Ellgen, who is with the Office of U.S. Senator Tina Smith. He has been on our program several times before and is coming by to share some updates with us on the big policy package that we've talked about before, the road to housing, and what is next in the Senate. And then finally, we will be joined by Ann Smedek. She is the Director and Senior Counsel for Housing Systems Response at Housing Justice Center. We've been really relying on her in Minnesota for so much advice on what's happening kind of in the regulatory sphere. And in addition to the mixed status rule, there are several other very concerning rules that have just dropped. And she is going to give us some information on some of those items. And I think I'll maybe just kind of hold off on that and let her address those topics. So with that, Marie Claire, I'd like to turn things over to you. And again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. And thank you all for having me here today. It's a busy time at National Housing Law Project. There was another rule that dropped, and we have another team working on that. But today I'm going to talk to you about the mixed status rule that dropped last week. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. So first, just for a second about National Housing Law Project. So we're leading legal and advocacy organization working at the federal, state, and local levels to advance housing rights and preserve affordable housing. We advocate, litigate, educate, and help build the housing justice movement. But we don't do this work alone. I see folks on this call who are part of our Housing Justice Network, and we work alongside the thousands of members of that network, especially during this time right now. And we're seeing a lot of things coming at us from the federal and state level. So today I'm going to break up the presentation in a couple parts. One, I'm going to give like a broad overview of mixed status families and HUD housing, who they are and what their current rights are. And I always start off with that because I think right now there's a lot of misinformation about what people's rights are, which is leading to a chilling effect amongst a lot of immigrant families. So kind of understanding the current state of the law is really important. And then I'll go over the proposed rule that HUD dropped last week. So first, I want to just kind of mention that this is really limited to the sort of major HUD housing programs. So public housing, Section 8 housing choice voucher program, and Section 8 project-based rental assistance. There are other programs that are mentioned here, but those are probably less commonly used. So this is the programs that are covered under a law called that we call Section 214, and that's Section 214 of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1980, and that is the law that really governs immigrant eligibility for enumerated housing programs. So the first question is who can receive HUD housing assistance? And in general, to get the housing subsidy, it's really limited to US citizens and nationals and non-citizens with eligible immigration status. And that one thing I want to kind of emphasize is that being ineligible for HUD housing does not necessarily mean that a person is undocumented, despite the statements of this administration. They often try to conflate the two things together. I think what we try to show in this chart here is that there's a whole universe of legal immigration statuses. And of that, there's a specific group of immigration statuses for which you can be eligible for HUD housing. Folks who may have legal status but may not be eligible for HUD housing include folks with U visas for survivors of serious crime, DACA recipients, and TPS holders. So that's who can receive HUD housing. This next screen talks about who can actually live together in HUD assisted housing. And that's where the concept of mixed status families come in. To live in HUD housing, to live in HUD assisted housing, at least one or more of the family members are eligible. So like on the last slide, they are either US citizens or they're a non-citizen with eligible immigration status. Other family members have the option to not contend eligibility. And we like to think of this as a third option between saying that you're eligible and saying that you're not eligible. Instead, these families have the right to not contend eligibility. So that means a few things. One is that they do not receive HUD assistance. The other is that they don't have to give their housing provider their immigration status. And especially during this time right now when there's such increased immigration enforcement and aggressive enforcement from this administration, which I don't have to tell folks from Minnesota. People being able to keep that information private is really important, and is also a design of the program. So together, the eligible family members and the family members who don't contend status or don't contend eligibility create a mixed status family. And mixed status families that live in HUD housing receive prorated rental assistance that only covers the eligible family members. For the rest of the family members, the family pays the rest of the rent themselves and covers the portion that would have otherwise covered the family members who don't contend eligibility. And so that means, ironically, that mixed status families actually pay more and contribute more into the housing programs than fully eligible families. And public housing authorities and owners can use these funds to help pay for help in the provision of affordable housing for other people. Right now, in the HUD housing programs, there's about 20,000 families across the country in public housing and voucher program. That is around 80,000 total residents and nearly 37,000 children. And the vast majority of those children are US citizens. And there is a very specific and concrete racial impact from this rule because, if this rule were to go into effect, because over 86% of families are Hispanic or Latino, and you also have 8% families who are Black and 2% who are Asian and Pacific Islander. So that brings us to the proposed rule that HUD issued last week. And the proposed rule would do two main things. So first, it really targets mixed status families, and it would essentially ban them from the HUD housing programs. The way they go about doing that is to require every household member to be a U.S. citizen or a non-citizen with eligible immigration status, even though Section 214, a federal statute, gives mixed status families the right to live together in HUD housing. So that means the family members would lose their right to not to contend eligibility, and these families would no longer be able to receive prorated rental assistance. The real life impact of that, of course, is that uh, it would leave families with an impossible choice. One is to separate and to kick out the ineligible family member. But because there are so many of these families where the eligible family member are children, the more likely result is that families would have to face eviction and homelessness together. The other thing to note here is that the administration really has really tried to get families to self-evict. And they have used a lot of different ways to do that. They've put out these big press statements. They've talked about um, people having like the public housing authorities having to report them. They use that language in this proposed rule. So their ultimate goal is to get families to self-evict. And we have seen some of the results of that because they tried to propose this rule in 2019, and fortunately, there was a huge pushback against that rule, which I'll talk about in a second. But we do see the numbers drop from 2019 to 2026. And so one of the key messages that I just want to share with folks is, to the extent that anyone is working with communities who might have mixed status families, it is so important to make sure that people get the information about what their rights are, and that they don't have to move out now, and that they have time to figure out what they want to do. And also, this rule has galvanized so many people already in this first week that I think we're going to have a lot of feedback, or a lot of comments to push back against the rule. So the other part of the rule that I want to talk about is the second part, which is around verification of citizenship status in the HUD housing programs. So the rule would require citizens. Well, first, let me back up. Citizens today, to verify their status in HUD housing, would only have to provide a signed declaration of their citizenship in order to be eligible for HUD housing. And public housing authorities have the option to require documents, but it's not something that's required across the board. What the administration is trying to propose now is that instead of relying on signed declarations, they want public housing authorities to run all HUD residents who are citizens through a program called the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlement System. This is otherwise known as SAVE. And this is a system that you may be hearing about right now in the voting rights context, because some states are trying to run their voter rolls through SAVE. And it's coming up with a lot of inaccuracies and kicking off people off voter rolls where they were their citizens. So now HUD is trying to introduce that program into the housing programs. And that raises a lot of red flags for us because, we focus in on the mixed status families for this rule. And also, I think this is a huge huge risk of housing for U.S. citizens. It's really untested program. This program did not verify for citizenship before 2025. Before this administration, it was only used to verify immigration status, and that was its core function for many years. But over a few months in 2025, the administration overhauled the program and is trying to use it for citizenship verification. And HUD is the one of the first federal program benefits programs where they would use it across the board. So this has huge implications, I think, for housers, but also is a I think I was talking to a colleague the other day, a little bit of a canary in the coal mine of what's to come, I think, around public benefits and the data of benefit holders. The other part of this rule is that it would uh, eliminate some exemptions for older non-citizens, improving their immigration status, which has, again, been something that's been on the books for a number of years. So just, very, very briefly, the impacts if the proposed rule goes into effect. One, we've talked about before, mixed status families will be separated or evicted. And this just, of course, adds to the chilling effect and to the terror that a lot of immigrant families are feeling right now. I think for many of us who work around HUD, I do not think that the actions of HUD stay at HUD. There's a ripple effect across communities, and so that's something I think also to keep in mind. The other thing is that there will be less housing for everyone, less HUD housing for everyone, and this is part of the regulatory impact analysis that HUD has released as part of the rule. If you remember before, mixed status families actually pay more in rent and contribute more to the housing programs. And if we kick them out of the programs, then we lose that funding as well. And in HUD's calculations, public housing authorities would have to choose some ways to deal with the shortfall, whether it's providing less vouchers or letting vacant units sit, which is a huge problem in this day and age when we're facing such an acute housing crisis. And then the last, because of this overhaul of the citizenship verification process, we do think that there will be a risk to the housing of citizens and eligible immigrants within HUD housing. And then when you couple that with some of the other rules that have come out, so today, HUD have released some rules to impose time limits and work requirements. All of those things together really create a very precarious moment for HUD housing programs at a time, again, where we really need them to be strong and robust for people who need the assistance. So our plan is really to figure out how to block the mixed status families proposal. This is kind of a big map of the rulemaking process. Right now, we're at step 6, which is public comments. And this is extremely important right now. In 2019, when this rule came about, we were able to get 30,000 comments in. And that was broke records at the time. And the overwhelming majority of the comments opposed the rule. That included tenants, housing providers, immigrant advocates, health providers. It was a huge coalition of individuals, and it was so effective that it really stopped the final rule from even being published. We don't have that sort of time on our side this time around. Number one, they've started earlier in the term. Number two, the government has ways to go through comments faster than they did during the first Trump administration. But I think that still means that we want an even stronger response of how harmful this rule is and how people do not want housing providers to become immigration enforcement. And I know a lot of our partners at the national level, like the industry groups, are really coming out against this and mobilizing their members because they feel like right now we need to take a stand against what this government is trying to do around housing and immigration. Um, and so I think just to, I think there's a couple of things that we're trying to do in this space. One is that we're trying to get a lot of organizational comments that are very substantive and that could help form the administrative record for litigation. And so, we're happy to provide any support that we can to folks who are interested in that. We have also launched in collaboration with the Protecting Immigrants Families Coalition, the Keep Families Together campaign. And this is the website that we put together. And this is where we really want to drive a lot of the individual comments. We think organizational comments are extremely important, but we also want individuals to kind of take, 10 minutes out of their day and be able to tell the government why this is not a good idea. So I'll make sure to put that in the chat, but I wanted to put it here because we were bringing a lot of people together. And I think the combination of really strong substantive organizational comments and a lot of individuals kind of expressing their opposition to this can help us to really beat back the rule as much as we can. So I'll stop there. And I know there's some questions in the chat, so I can take a look at that. But I think, Elizabeth, if you want to.
Yeah, I can kind of help navigate the questions in the chat for you, Marie Claire, and thank you so much. That was such a clear presentation. Let me just kind of go down the questions. Ben Ellgen from Senator Smith's office actually asked about some of the data that you shared and if there are state-by-state breakdowns on who may be impacted. And so what orgs are doing that kind of work, or where can we look for that? And you're on your mute, Marie Claire. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, that's a very good question. So the Center for Budget is one of our main research partners here. And so they have a report that does a state-by-state breakdown of the mixed status families in each state. So I think that and I'll put that in the chat. That has a chart of the mixed status families in each state, so we can find how many are in Minnesota. And then also the broader breakdown of like how many citizens would have to undergo the verification process, I think, is also numbers from that the center has. So I will put that report on mixed status families in HUD housing in the chat.
So you kind of listed some very specific programs, and I think some folks have questions about impacts on similar but programs that were beyond what you mentioned. So Shelley has asked about senior housing, specifically HUD 202 housing. I know some of us also work, this is a HUD rule, but some of us work with USDA programs where there also are rental assistance products and things like that. So do you have any feedback on that?
Sure. So it does not cover 202. So I'm like fairly confident in that. That question has come up a bit this week, and I think we're pretty confident, but I will double check that, but it does not cover 202. So and then you're right, Section 214 covers both specific HUD housing programs and specific USDA programs. The mixed status rule from HUD does not change the does not change anything on the USDA side. However, we do expect that at some point the administration will try to change its policy around mixed status families. And we're not exactly sure how they'll do that. It will probably be some sort of proposed rule like this. But we've also seen the administration take other tactics, I think, in the USDA space. So that's definitely something that we're monitoring, and we will you will for sure kind of hear more from us if that's coming down the line. But we don't have a timeline on it. I think in the past, USDA has kind of followed HUD's lead, but also on a slower timeline on a lot of policies. But it hasn't, it has surprised us in some ways. So we are sort of on the lookout for changes to USDA.
Thank you. Let's take a few more questions and then we will turn to our other speakers who are here as well. But Maria and Yvette have kind of both been asking a series of questions that goes to just trying to get the word out essentially. Like, are there suggestions on how to ensure there is more clarity about who's eligible, who's not, who's impacted, who's not. Um, I don't know, Yvette or Maria, if either of you want to say anything more about your question. And Yvette also raised the interplay with public charge.
Yeah,
And-
I'm sorry. I am recovering from a COVID exposure really badly.
oh, I'm so
Um, but um, I can share that even in families, we have left and right supporters, and even in casual conversations when we said non-citizens are not eligible to be in affordable housings or rental units. And it's just so interesting the dynamic when you cannot convince them that there are rules that we as organizations need to follow. And those rules are very strict. So I feel like the vast majority of the people that get the message from uh, other sources are fixed and convinced that that is not the case. So how can we efficiently educate the community and in a way that is clear, like you say, Elizabeth?
and Marie Claire, you kind of popped back on with your mute, just FYI.
Oh yeah, I was just I guess I'm curious, like when you say community members, is this like the broader community? Is it immigrant communities that you're talking about?
I'm talking in general at the community,
Uh-huh.
but that's why I mentioned this example as in my own family, I have members that are left or right supporters. And
Yeah.
even though we can have healthy conversations about these type of topics, um, they're fixed or convinced that what I'm telling them is not accurate. So how we as leaders effectively communicate this to the broader community.
Yeah, I mean that's been a struggle, and it's been a struggle especially since we're seeing such like I mean especially on this issue of mixed status families, a lot of what the administration has put out is just like plain false, you know, like for example they um have tried to make it seem like folks without status um can receive subsidies, that the housing assistance, and that's just not the way it is. And also, you know, this is also something that is that Congress created as a compromise because they wanted to limit housing assistance to eligible individuals, but they also didn't want to break up families. So the ability for mixed status families to stay together was a purposeful compromise. So I mean I think you know, I don't have like a great answer for that, except I think, you know, as this comment period goes on, and this comment period ends, I think in mid-April, part of the goal is to like get comments and get people invested and to weigh in. But it is also going to be like a lot of education and trying to get the information out there. And I think this is one of those issues where people need multiple touches on like on what this is, because it's not the most straightforward issue, but the concept, the very core value of the need to keep families together, we hope will resonate with folks.
All right, and maybe just one last question. There's one more kind of data type question on whether there's been any analysis done on how this proposed rule might impact PHAs and how they, kind of resource the services and the housing that they provide.
So there's data that we have out there in 2019 where the administration wanted the public housing authorities to get documents from everyone, like birth certificates and passports to verify status. That was an astronomical number. This time I think there's less data because they're using a system that's like fairly untested, which is SAVE. And so we don't have as many hard numbers, but we are working on trying to pull out the numbers that we can. But I think they're trying to make the argument that this automated system will actually create less of a burden. But I think many of us know that it will actually create probably even more of a burden given it's a new technology, it doesn't work very well, and you still have to get documents for a lot of people anyway. So that's a good question, and I think we will. It's good feedback for kind of some of the materials that our campaign needs to put out to folks.
Maybe just one last clarifying question I want to make sure before we go on. But Yvette has asked about, what non-citizens are eligible. And I know you did have a slide in your PowerPoint, but wanted to ask, is that comprehensive? Just so we kind of really can understand that piece.
It's pretty comprehensive. I can put it up again. The other thing that I will put in the chat, and maybe if it's part of the materials, is that NHLP did put together like a legal analysis or a more in-depth analysis of the rule, and that will have like citations and like a more just wonkier legal discussion of the provisions of the rule in case people want to get into the nitty gritty. But here, this is generally the list. So LPRs or green card holders, asylees and refugees, people granted withholding of removal, certain parolees. And then these last two, survivors of human trafficking is not in the statute, but sort of these folks are treated the same as refugees, so that's why they are here. And VAWA self-petitioners is something that has historically been as a group that has historically been included. Right now, we are in the middle of trying to analyze some an opinion that came out of DOJ that seems to suggest that VAWA self-petitioners are not covered by Section 214. And I think we're hoping to have a stronger answer for folks next week. But this is an area, this space in particular, housing, there's a ton of stuff going on in housing with HUD. And then the intersection of housing and immigration, we've seen just a lot of changes, I think, even in the past few weeks. So I think you can use this, but know that there are some open questions right now of where the administration is trying to go with some of its regulations.
Okay. Well, thank you again so very much, Marie Claire. This was incredibly helpful. I think you could see we had a lot of questions, so people are really engaging with this information, and thank you for all of your work. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Ben Ellgen from Senator Tina Smith's office, who has graciously agreed at my last minute request to give us an update on what's happening in the Senate relating to housing. Thanks so much, Ben.
Yeah, thanks so much, Elizabeth. Good to be here. Thanks to MHP for hosting these calls, and I'll do my best to follow up that great presentation. And I will just say that we're tracking the mixed status rule, the other rulemakings that are coming out. We're tracking that very closely, and I think Congress will be engaging on that. But so lots going on in DC. The kind of well, I'll put an asterisk on everything that I'm going to say, in that everything is subject to change. Things are moving very fast. Things could change very quickly. But it is our expectation. There is a vote scheduled on Monday for the Senate to take the first procedural vote to begin consideration of the road to housing package. And so again, this is a procedural vote. It's very technical and silly, frankly, but it's a positive step forward. Um, um, I think Elizabeth has sent around information on what is in road, and so maybe I'll happy to talk about that, but I'll maybe talk more about the negotiations which are underway, which have kind of begun or resumed in earnest between the Senate and our Road to Housing package leaders in the House of Representatives, who have their parallel, or I think competing package, the Housing in the 21st Century Act. And then now the White House has begun to engage and has joined negotiations, particularly around their interest and support in a new provision that would restrict private equity institutional investors' activity in the single family housing market. And so all of those parties are talking right now. They are negotiating on trying to find some sort of compromise package that all sides can support. And so that is underway, kind of behind the scenes as we kind of move forward to a vote. And then the expectation is that hopefully, if we can get to a deal, that is something that the Senate will vote on as soon as this week, potentially. So that's kind of the short of it. Um, um, there's a lot of reporting on maybe what is in that deal, but that is against subject to negotiation. We don't know definitively. Senator Smith is very supportive of the Senate road package, which got great bipartisan support, and she is interested in preserving as much of the road package as we can, and frankly, not having it watered down. Um, um, I think there is bipartisan interest and opportunity in the private equity issue. The president has come out kind of with a proposal. Many Senate Democrats, including Senator Smith, recently introduced a new bill to kind of do the same thing. And so that is kind of, I think, one of the biggest uncertainties of, what is that precise language going to look like? So um, um, and I'll say also, Senator Smith, she has two big bills of hers that have been included in road. That's the Rural Housing Service Reform Act that would make reforms at USDA housing programs, and then also a homelessness bill, her Reducing Homelessness Through Program Reform Act. And so she is supportive of making sure that those provisions are included in the final package and as part of negotiations. So again, very fluid. Expect a lot more to be coming out kind of this week as we kind of figure it out. But that's kind of the latest state of play on the package. So again, I think another positive step forward. All parties are talking to each other, but there's a lot of uncertainty about what a final deal could look like. So um, happy to take any questions or talk any further, but we're tracking this very closely. There's kind of open questions about what amendments could look like, what the amendment process could look like. I don't think we're at that part yet. We need to kind of land on a package in the first place and see where folks land with that. And then there might be more conversations about maybe amending that or further negotiating that. So I know that's a lot, kind of technical, a lot of politics at play, but happy to break down anything further.
Thanks so much for that update, Ben. And we have time for maybe a couple questions, and then we want to just have enough time to hear some additional important updates from Ann Smedak. Sue, do you have a question?
Yes, thanks. And thanks, Ben. So, Ben, it looks like both the bills in the House and in the Senate, does a lot of reframing of the different housing programs, but does not add significant dollars that we need to have to really address the over 7 million units that we don't have in rental housing, as well as in more than that in home ownership. And just wondering if there's going to be push for additional appropriations as this is moving forward too.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. That's a great question and a great point, and accurate in that. Um, I think both the House and the Senate proposals are focused on um, tweaking programs, making changes or making new programs, but there is very little to no new dollars attached to that. I think that is a reflection of, I think, just the political reality, in that there is not support from Republicans generally to, in massively increased appropriations. And so, if that were to be included in any proposal, it would struggle to, I think, obtain bipartisan support and pass. So, again, I think that's just the political reality. Senator Smith is extremely supportive of increasing appropriations for increasing the dollar amount for a variety of federal housing programs. To your point, to kind of meet the need in Minnesota and across the country. And separate from the road conversation, the fiscal year 27 budget process is starting to kick off kind of now and starting next month. And a part of that is going to be continuing to advocate for increased housing appropriations, defending current levels of housing resources at HUD and USDA, and something that we're continuing to work on. So I think that's the unfortunate political reality that we're in right now is my short answer. Or maybe that wasn't a short answer, but that's my short point.
That's great. Thank you so much. Any other immediate feedback?
If I could ask for one thing from you all, and appreciate the opportunity to share here. So again, we don't know exactly what is going to be included, but maybe once we do know, or a version comes out, or as the reporting evolves, we want to hear from you all. The senator wants to hear from you all about what is needed, what is important, what should we make sure stays in the package during negotiations, and so. Please don't hesitate to reach out to our office on, this bill is super important in road. Thank you so much. Or there's this new bill in the 21st century that you forgot in road. We would love to see that too. That is the kind of thing that we want to know and understand. Is again, I think there's an opportunity here to do something for the first time in decades. And so we're excited for that. We're arguing for that. But again, don't hesitate to let us know if you have particular thoughts on what is included in the package. So wanted to offer that and solicit that as well.
Thank you, Ben. And we will make sure we send out Ben's contact info, and we will probably also be maybe making some suggestions to folks about things to that would be a big positive. With that, thank you so much, Ben. Thanks for engaging with us as always. And as I said at the beginning of the program, we have a few last updates. We're really thankful to Ann Smedak from Housing Justice Center, who's been really following proposed regulatory changes kind of as they drop, so to speak. This usually means like they're announced in the Federal Register or some other place, and you need to sometimes be aware they might be coming and then have an eye out for them coming, and then also an eye for reading that bunch of legalese and bureaucratic language. But There are some very concerning rules being proposed in addition to the mixed status rule that we learned in depth about earlier this program. So Anne, turning it over to you to give us some additional update.
All right. Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks, Ben, and Mary Claire. So I am going to just quickly go through a few of the current updates that we are tracking and aware of. And then I made a quick PowerPoint that we will share out that has links to all of this stuff. When I started to go through all of it, there's quite a bit happening right now. So easier to put it into a quick PowerPoint to walk through. And I'll try to keep it fast so I can do some questions at the end. I know we're short on time. So the issues that we're tracking most closely, obviously the mixed status rule, which I won't talk about because that was covered earlier. There's a USDA final rule on 30-day notices, a HUD interim final rule on 30-day notices, a new and unexpected GSA proposed change to SAM.gov certification requirements, and a proposed rule on work requirements and time limits that came out just this morning. On the USDA side, USDA issued a final rule earlier this week that revoked a 30-day notice requirement. This is revoking a 2024 rule. It went into effect immediately, so that is now in effect. The rule previously required a 30-day notice before you could file a non-payment of rent case against a tenant in certain rural housing service properties. I will say that the text of the rule, or rather the preamble of the rule, references that the CARE Act requirement of a 30-day notice is still effective. That's been an issue of some debate in litigation around the country. So that is potentially still an option for those properties, but there will probably be litigation on that. On HUD published an interim final rule to revoke their 30-day notice requirement. And this 30-day notice requirement came out of a 2021 interim rule and then a 2024 final rule that required both PHAs and owners of PBRA properties to provide a 30-day notice before filing an eviction for non-payment of rent. The interim proposed rule from HUD revokes that requirement effective March 30th. HUD is accepting comments on that for 60 days, so comments will be accepted until April 27th. And I would say as we get closer to that comment period and in coming weeks, either I or Elizabeth or others will be sharing out additional ways to comment on that, and happy to provide more information on that. What is worth being aware of in Minnesota is this would revoke the HUD rule on notices for non-payment of rent. There is still a 30-day requirement in a number of jurisdictions in Minnesota, which I believe right now Minneapolis, St. Paul will soon be there. I think St. Louis Park and others. And there is also ongoing debate, I would say, about whether the CARES Act imposes its own 30-day requirement on these properties as well. So this is one step by HUD. It will take a little while to parse out what all of this means for all the various types of properties in Minnesota. This one is new, and so GSA is providing some significant changes or proposing some significant changes to the SAM.gov certification. So the SAM.gov certification is what anyone who wants to apply for federal funds, almost anyone who wants to apply for federal funds, has to register at SAM.gov, and I believe has to re-up their registration regularly. And there is a certification requirement as part of SAM.gov. We became aware earlier this week that GSA is attempting to impose additional new certification requirements that everyone who registers in SAM.gov will have to certify to. I think I can say out loud, this was a little bit hidden. It was in a Paperwork Reduction Act request published by the GSA, which means the text of what they're asking to do doesn't go in the Federal Register. You have to track through a few more steps to pull up the actual documents that they're trying to change to see what's being proposed. So I think everyone was a little bit slow on catching on to this one. This is now being tracked by the Minnesota Attorney General's office, and they're working on potential next step. And the National Council of Nonprofits I talked to yesterday, and they are planning to put out a push next week with more information and how to comment on it. So I will just flag for you all that the language would require pretty broad certification language on anti-DEI provisions, including specific examples. I'll share a couple of those on the next page. Has broad prohibitions on actions that could be considered aiding illegal aliens. And includes a prohibition on actions that threaten public safety or national security. I think in normal times, that part probably wouldn't be concerning, but some of the language we have heard about what is being considered a threat to public safety or national security might make that a little more concerning. So comments are due on this on March 30th. And again, the national groups will be putting out materials next week, we expect, and Elizabeth and I will help share those out and talk more about this and how people can comment and engage on this piece. And I just pulled out for reference, although it is linked in the PowerPoint as well, so folks can go actually look at the language after this when we send out the slides, but this is a little bit of some of the words that are being used in the proposed certification, exceptionally broad language on what is prohibited on the DEI side. And I think I'm not going out on a limb to say that this exceeds the current state of federal law. And so it is concerning that grantees could be asked to certify to language like this. I will also flag that similar language has been found unenforceable by courts when included in federal grant agreements. So more to come on that one, and watch for more from us next week. And then the new rule that came out
Hey, Anne,
just this
before you
morning.
explain this
Yeah.
rule, can you go back for just a second?
This one?
One more.
Yeah.
One more. Oh, maybe. So there was another slide I'm not seeing now that said GSA, right? So we had a question in the chat, was just, kind of center folks on what is GSA, because I think that's sort of a grounding piece folks need.
So GSA is the General Services Administration. It's sort of the centralized part of the federal government that handles things like leases and centralized IT systems. And it just so happens to host the sam.gov website, which is the website where everyone needs to register before you can apply for federal funds, and where everyone needs to regularly re-up their registration to be able to continue to receive federal funds. So we don't deal with GSA very often, but it just so happens that they want to make changes to the sam.gov system, which touches almost every applicant or recipient of federal funds. That answer the question? Okay. So the other one, I know we're almost out of time, but this just came out for public inspection today, and you may have seen previous reporting where there were leaked versions of this rule in Politico a few months ago. But HUD released for public inspection its proposed rule on work requirements and time limits this morning. We expect that to probably be published on Monday in the Federal Register. And if that happens, then the comment period would end May 1st. This tracks pretty closely. I haven't done a line-by-line comparison, but it's pretty close to what was leaked to the press previously, in that it would permit, so it doesn't require, but it would permit PHAs and owners of project-based rental assistance properties to impose work requirements of up to 40 hours a week and time limits as short as 2 years. Now, I will say there is some additional language in the rule that we just haven't parsed out yet about various potential exceptions to that. This rule could potentially apply to public housing, project-based rental assistance, project-based vouchers, and housing choice vouchers. So what I want to stress on this one is it is a proposed rule. So it is not in effect and will not be in effect for a while. We're in the comment period for the 60 days, and this is voluntary. So it would allow PHAs and owners to impose these things, but would not require it. So we'll be looking at this closely and looking at whether there are things that the state could or should do in response, given that this would be permissive on the federal side. But this just came out this morning, and I have only skimmed it at this point. I know Marie Claire is on as well, but I would say we're probably not ready for detailed substantive questions on that one, flagging just for awareness that it's out and more to come on that. And I think that is the end of my very quick PowerPoint.
Thanks so much, Anne. And just to kind of reiterate, these things Anne is sharing, we will be communicating about these quite a bit into the future. We'll have more opportunity to engage. We know that there are a lot of national partners as well as other state partners that will be putting out more information. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. You're going to be hearing a lot more about this and opportunities to engage and understand more, but also recommendations on how you can participate, submit comments, all those kinds of things. Sue, we have just a couple minutes before we got to close here.
Just real quick. So, Anne, if this does move forward, and hopefully it will not move forward, but if it does, the local HRAs and PHAs have to do their own plan each year. There has to be, basically public comment and approval in the community. So folks could push if this does go forward, they could push in their local plan that they don't implement this. Is that correct?
Yes, so when we're talking about the work requirements and time limits, it would, I believe, again, based on a quick look, need to be in their various plans that are public and do take public comment. So there will be, if we get to the point where this is actually a rule, hopefully we never do, but if we do, there will be opportunities to influence and push back and advocate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone. We will see you in a month and you'll be hearing from us before then. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Everyone.